we're going to jump right in, folks, because we do have our friend Kshama Sawant waiting. She is going to join us in progress for this segment here because a horrible, horrible event took place in the West Bank. Israeli soldiers fatally shot an American woman at a West Bank protest, a witness says. So just to set this up, from the AP, Israeli soldiers killed an American woman demonstrating against settlements in the West Bank on Friday, according to a witness who said she was shot while posing no threat to Israeli forces and during a moment of calm after clashes earlier in the afternoon. Two Palestinian doctors said 26-year-old Aysenur Eygi, of Seattle, was shot in the head. The U.S. government confirmed Eygi's death, but did not say whether the recent graduate of the University of Washington, who is also a Turkish citizen, had been shot by Israeli troops. The White House said it was, quote, deeply disturbed by the killing of a U.S. citizen and called on Israel to investigate what happened. The Israeli military said it was looking into reports that troops had killed a foreign national while firing at an instigator of violent activity in the area of the protest. Eygi, a volunteer with the activist group International Solidarity Movement, was attending a weekly demonstration against settlement expansion that has been held for years and has often brought Israeli crackdowns and protester stone throwing. Jonathan Pollock, an Israeli participating in Friday's protests, said the shooting occurred shortly after dozens of Palestinians and international activists held a communal prayer on a hillside outside the northern West Bank town of Baita, overlooking the Israeli settlement of Ivatar. Soldiers surrounded the prayer, and clashes soon broke out, with Palestinians throwing stones and troops firing tear gas and live ammunition, Pollock said. The protesters and activists retreated and clashes subdued, he said. He then watched as two soldiers on the roof of a nearby home trained a gun in the group's direction and fired. So here is a video with this activist mentioned in the piece.
Jonathan Pollock. I was there when she was shot. We got to Beta for the weekly demonstration against the settlement there. The army was already present where people pray in protest of the settlement. As soon as the prayer ended, clashes ensued, and the army shot tear gas and live ammunition immediately. We were forced to retreat down towards the village and ended up standing at the outskirts of the built-up area of the village, about 150-200 meters away from where the soldiers were. We stayed there for about half an hour. Soldiers at some point took over a rooftop that has a view of the entire area, including where we were. It was quiet. There was nothing to justify the shot. The shot was taken to kill. There were 2 shots fired from the rooftop. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know the difference in sound between tear gas, rubber-coated bullets, live ammunition. These were 2 separate shots of live ammunition, shot one after the other. The first one hit a metal object, and then a young man from the village in his thigh. And then I heard another shot. And then I heard people calling my name in English, saying, we need help, come help us. I ran over there about 10 or 15 meters behind me, farther away from the soldiers, into the olive groves. I found her lying on the ground beside the tree, bleeding from her head. I put my hand under her head to try and stop the bleeding. I took her pulse. She had a very weak pulse. We called the ambulance. From there, we evacuated her to the village's medical center, where the doctor came into the ambulance and continued to the hospital, where they tried to resuscitate her, but failed.
Just a gutting account Our friend Kshama Sawant, Eygi was murdered by the Israeli state in the West Bank. I knew Eygi well, pardon me. The last time I talked to her was at a recent worker strike back meeting where we discussed strategy for the anti-war movement. The way to honor her memory is to organize to end the genocide, which right now requires rejecting both warmongers, Harris and Trump, and building the vote for Jill Stein's anti-war campaign. They are having a meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. Local time in Seattle in memory of Eygi, and I would say it's a pleasure to welcome Kshama Sawant, since it's usually a pleasure, but these are obviously horrible circumstances under which we're going to have this conversation. But you all know her and love her. She is the former city council member from Seattle and the founder and organizer of Workers Strike Back, Kshama Sawant. Kshama, can you hear me? I know there's a little bit of a delay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So, Kshama, I would say it's great to see you again, but not exactly under these circumstances. So, you knew Eygi. Why don't you start wherever you want?
First of all, thank you so much for playing Jonathan Pollock's interview there, because it was very important what he highlighted, that this was not an accidental death. It was an intentional shot in the head by the Israeli military to a peaceful activist. It is just shocking. And as Eygi herself would have been the first to say this, the news of her murder, essentially murder by the Israeli military, has come across as such a shocking news because she's an American citizen. And at the same time, we've had so many being killed in the West Bank, and we know a genocide is underway in Gaza with 200,000 people having been killed, which represents 10%, nearly 10% of the population. I mean, this is unspeakable horrors that are unfolding. And it's I obviously it's gut wrenching for me and others who knew her. She was a socialist alongside me in we were together in the same organization, as were many other socialists from Workers Strike Back in Seattle. We were all in the same organization. We organized together. She was only 18 when she went along with other socialists. We had this delegation that joined Standing Rock activists at the time, and this was December. It was freezing cold there, and she was probably the youngest person that we had go from here, and she insisted on going. She really wanted to go, and that hopefully will give your viewers a little bit of a sense of who she was. She was a dedicated anti-war activist. She identifies as a socialist, and in some ways, one of the most heart-wrenching things for me is that I talked to her just a few months ago. She was at one of our Worker Strike Back meetings in Seattle at the University of Washington, and after the meeting, she and I had a long conversation about strategy specifically for the encampment protest. This was during the spring quarter at the University of Washington, and we were talking about what is an effective strategy for the encampment, and she strongly agreed with what we were saying at the time, which is that the encampment leaders really need to call for mass rallies on campus, really inviting the students who are not part of the encampment per se, but are absolutely anti-war, are angry, and are looking to do something, to have rallies that are organized not only on the sort of the campus level divestment demand, but really against the war itself, against genocide, and calling for an end to US military funding. And also, I think the elephant in the room, and this is going to matter even for the fall quarter again, or fall semesters again, is that the student movement really needs to link up with the Jill Stein campaign, because it is really important that all sectors of the anti-war movement just break from Harris and Trump. And so these were the questions we were talking about, and she strongly agreed with many of these positions. And it's just, I don't know, I don't have words to describe the feeling of utter loss and tragedy, and also anger that we're feeling.
That's really tragic. Had she graduated? Was she still in school?
She had just graduated in June.
What were her plans for her future?
I don't know what exactly her plans were, but I know that she was studying psychology and Middle Eastern studies, and I know that whatever she would have done, she was going to be a dedicated activist, and at this moment, it was her focus, as ours was, on organizing to end the genocide.
Now, she goes over there, an American, Shireen Abu Akleh was an American as well. What other country gets to just kill Americans and get away with it? And, we issue some milquetoast statement. Remember when Otto Warmbier was abused in a North Korean prison and he came back and he died? And the general consensus here was, how dare they do this to one of our, I mean, what happens to Israel? They could just They could just shoot Americans? Even if you are an anti-Palestinian racist, Shireen Abu Akleh was an American. This beautiful young woman here is an American. Nothing happens. They could just shoot Americans in the head.
I think that's absolutely what stands out, is that even the killing by the Israeli military of American citizens has not slowed the advance of the bloody policies of the Biden-Harris administration 1 inch. I think that's really the point to be highlighted here, and it's and that can only be explained. The fact that the Israeli state is getting away with this can only be explained by the fact that it is in the interests of US capitalism and imperialism to allow this genocide to continue unabated. And in fact, they're not allowing it simply by not speaking up about it or something like that. They are actively enabling it by tens of millions of dollars of US military funding, and that has continued unabated. And in fact, it's not even, as we all know, it's not an incidental aspect of what the Israeli state is doing in Gaza and the West Bank. The weapons that the US imperialism is sending them is the backbone of the genocide. And so we've said before that the blood of the people who have been killed, the Palestinian people who have been killed in this genocide, is on the hands of Biden and Harris and the Democrats and Republicans. It has to be said the blood of Eygi is also on their hands, and it makes me so infuriated that the Biden administration and Anthony Blinken, all of them expressing condolences. It just, their crocodile tears make me so angry. And it's not just them; it's every Democrat, whether it's AOC or Pramila Jayapal, whoever has issued statements about Eygi. It is just it just makes me so angry to see that they are using her name to act like they're humane when they are the ones who are instigating this genocide. And so I think it has to be highlighted that these Democrats, all of these Democrats, they have lost all credibility, all authority, all believability to speak of the needs of the oppressed. I mean, it is exposed as a rotten, warmongering party of genocide and of the billionaire class. It's morally and politically bankrupt in every sense of the word.
What is wrong with the Israeli people that they can conduct themselves this way? This isn't an isolated incident. They do this all the time, shooting journalists quite clearly intentionally, shooting activists. What do you think allows them to conduct themselves this way, especially with, obviously the Holocaust is really the founding myth of Israel. I mean, the founding central story, not saying the Holocaust is a myth. And how do they not see that they are acting out the role of their former oppressors in this way? Because when you hear these things, it's just unlike the behavior you hear of any other state really on earth. I mean, even when you consider some states that we would consider horrible, you just really never hear a state that is so consistently committing these acts that are just absolutely barbaric, and yet is celebrated as this oasis of Western values, which, given the history, it may very well be, but not in the way they intend that phrase.
Yeah, I think it's impossible to understand this as obviously Russell and Keaton, you know this. It's impossible to parse through this and understand what's happening and in the Israeli consciousness without looking at the systemic aspects of it. I mean, the Holocaust might have been used as some sort of moral sort of dressing up, justification of the whole history of the decades-long history of Israel and the oppression and the killing and the occupation of the Palestinians. But really, that's not, as we know, that's not what explains what actually happened. And that is absolutely not what explains the genocide either. It can only be understood through the full truth, which is the reality of Western imperialism, which is tied up with the interests of capitalism, and the interests of US imperialism being very centrally served by having a state that is that allows them to an have an absolute control over that region. And obviously it is about oil interests, but it's not only about oil interests. Obviously that's a central component, but it's also the overall agenda of US and Western imperialism. And it wasn't just the US in the beginning, it was British imperialism as well. But it's, it's overall the interests of Western imperialism, right now predominantly US imperialism, their interest in maintaining unshakable control, entrenched control over that region, and that this is the only way they have been able to do it. And in order to achieve this, I mean, this is like sort of the shorthand history version of the history of many decades, obviously, but in order to make the Israeli state and the creation and then the maintaining of the Israeli state as this crucial and essential bulwark of US imperialism and Western capitalism in the oil-rich Middle East, that process also inevitably included just a very conscious and intentional and systematic fostering of extreme Zionist visions and the sort of the ideology and all of you can't understand why this kind of extreme Zionist ideology developed without understanding that is actually part and parcel of the project of capitalism and imperialism. It's not that just some people just decided to be really, really bad and really, really evil. It is evil, absolutely evil, but the evil comes out of these systemic necessities of capitalism and imperialism. And so in order to dismantle this evil that has been perpetrated on the Palestinian people for decades, we are also going to have to understand what's at the root of this, and understand that in order to address this, it will require an almighty mass movement against imperialist forces, and this will have to happen internationally, and that also will end up putting all kinds of it will actually create openings in the Israeli, the peak consciousness of ordinary people. Obviously, as we know, unfortunately, we are in a situation right now where the sort of the very negative ideas towards Palestinians, there's a significant component of that. There's a preponderance of those ideas. But what I'm trying to say is that history shows that it is possible to shake that kind of consciousness and build solidarity across religion, across ethnicity, but that is only going to happen on a working class and anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist basis, because these what we're seeing, these absolutely deep divisions, and then as a result of that, all of this horror that is being unleashed is a result of divide and conquered or divide and rule policies. And it inevitably happens that this kind of brutality will be unleashed on a section of the population in this region, and that's what's happening. So I think at the end of the day, the global anti-war movement has to have as part of its objective to really win over a section of the Israeli consciousness as well. I mean, we've seen examples. I'll just end on this. We've seen examples where it seemed completely impossible to shake consciousness from a very bad position. I mean, some of us are old enough to remember what happened right after 9/11. I mean, the sentiment of the overwhelming section of the working class in America was actually in a very bad place because of what happened. Americans actually supported the bombing of Afghanistan, and initially many did support the launching of the Iraq war, but then an anti-war movement did develop, and it was crucial, it was essential that the anti-war movement was not just elsewhere, but that it became strong inside the US. That was absolutely the backbone of ending the Iraq war. And so now I would say that it is crucial that the strikes and mass protests are taking place inside Israel. And I don't know if you have numbers, but if you look at it as a proportion of the Israeli population, these are massive numbers, absolutely massive numbers. I mean, we just saw.
But remember, Kshama, they're not protesting on behalf of the Palestinians.
No,
they're protesting for the hostages.
Yes, that's true. No, that's true. I mean, there's a small section of the population that is. I mean, we know there are socialists there. We know there are Marxists there.
Yeah.
There are people on the left. I just want it's important that we acknowledge that seed, because that seed is crucial.
Elon Pape.
Sorry.
Elon Pape is back here.
Yeah. I mean, there are people there. But I don't disagree with you. At this moment, it is absolutely focused on the Israeli hostages. It is not on the side of the Palestinians. It is not actually a protest against genocide. But it is important that these are mass protests of a very big scale. I think that this has now surpassed the largest protests in the US, which are the Black Lives Matter protests. I mean, it has far surpassed that as a proportion of the population. So this is it's a very important development. Will it be the tipping point? I don't think so, but it is a tipping point that is extremely crucial, because that's the first step. The anger against Netanyahu and the politicians who they are now exposed as caring about their own political careers, and not actually about the hostages. That's an important development. That's not enough, but it is important for us, those who are on the left and who have an interest in building a mass anti-war movement, for us to recognize that development. And it is important that the left inside Israel, as small as it is, develop on that, actually connect the demands around the economy, because the economy, and you guys have talked about this, the economy is an absolute crisis in Israel, to connect that with ending of the war, even if it's on a basis that is not immediately pro-Palestinian, because that's what anti-war movements look like initially. I mean, even the anti-Vietnam War movement, that did not, the beginnings of it, or even the mass character of it, was not about feeling sad or rage about the injustice against the Vietnamese people. It was about American soldiers dying and the body bags coming home. So that is a starting point, and we have to make the most of it.